know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show. Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada's sportsbook.
What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
As the dust settles, the sun rests and then rises again on a grateful universe. Johnny Gaudreau is now a member of the Columbus Blue Jackets, signing for under $10 million. What?
An earthquake.
What?
This is an earthquake.
Why?
Fire the cannon, Julian. Fire the cannon.
Can we actually put in the sound of the Columbus cannon? Because I think that would be very appropriate. It is a bombshell. It is a big deal in the hockey world because we all know the first day of a free agent frenzy brought about many a deal, but none quite as surprising as that one. Why is Johnny Hockey Johnny Columbus now, CJ? You have to tell the people why.
Because he's long admired the Blue Jackets organization. I actually think in our search for deeper meaning in this decision, I think we're going to miss kind of the obvious. And I don't mean that it's obvious in that a whole lot of people were predicting this. In fact, on free agency day, someone whispered in my ear at like 7:30 in the morning while texted into my phone, keep an eye on Columbus. And I not that I dismissed it, but I thought like, oh, wow, we're going to really be on one today if that's the rumors. But, upon sort of further looking at things, he was looking to get back east towards family, which is something that's sort of been out there as a thought for him. And the Blue Jackets were one of the teams that appealed to him. I mean, look, not everyone in the East would have had the cap space to sign him to a $9.75 million contract. He's signing long-term. His wife is due to have a baby here in the next few months. And he's got to be somewhere his family's comfortable with and a place that could pay him. And you're really, when you look at it, there are only a handful that could sort of meet those needs. And Johnny was quite comfortable with the idea of becoming a Blue Jacket. So, I think at first the Blue Jackets themselves might have been a little surprised when they learned of it, but, I don't think this is like, we don't need the Brian Windhorst, like, what does it mean kind of thing going on? Because I think what it really means is the guy wanted to live on the East Coast. He thinks the Blue Jackets are going to head in the right direction. They could pay him a contract he liked. It's a great city to live in. And here we go.
Wait, so there's one point in your last answer that's sticking with me. Johnny Gaudreau has long admired the Columbus Blue Jackets organization. I had no idea that he did. And was that something he brought up yesterday? Was that something? Is there other clues that led to that? Like, I'd like to know about how much Johnny Gaudreau how long he's admired this organization for. It's still a little bit surprising.
Well, as I've dug into it, that's something that's come up. It's just that he liked playing there. There's that funny, gif going around of him getting scared off by the cannon during a warm-up while he was with the Flames. He's good friends with a guy named Eric Robinson, who's been part of the Blue Jackets organization. I have to say, too, like, I don't know why Columbus gets sort of pooped on so much. Like, I actually really don't get it. Like, my only guess is that a lot of people haven't been there because it's actually really quite a nice little city. And like a great food scene, obviously for young people, which most NHL players are, there's good bars and restaurants, it's a college town and it's a great place to raise a family. So, like Rick Nash went and played there and, he went and played in Manhattan after, like he still calls Columbus home and, he's got the financial means and this was even before he got hired by the Blue Jackets again, but he could have lived anywhere. So I think that Columbus gets a little bit of an unfair shake, quite honestly, especially from the Canadian media, because I don't really get it. I've traveled to all the NHL cities. Actually, I've never covered a game in Seattle. I've been to Seattle personally, and Columbus it's got much more. If you're judging a book by its cover, it's actually still in a decent part of this. It's not rough in any way. It's not scary. It's not dangerous. So I think part of this is the surprise is the perception of Columbus broadly seems to not really be in line with what Columbus is, at least in my view.
My thinking is just with the players who have played in that organization and have eventually left the organization. I think of a guy like Artemi Panarin, who was there for 2 seasons and decided to go to New York. And I understand, like, if New York is out there, like, of course, but they've never come across as a market that teams were clamoring to go to.
Right. Well, we got a salary cap, right? I mean, let's not look past it. In a world without a cap, if all 32 teams could just bid what they want to pay Johnny Gaudreau, he's probably not ending up in Columbus. But I think you could say the same for most of the players that signed everywhere on day one of free agency. Like a lot of these decisions get driven by a triangulation of what you can get paid, the needs the team has, maybe some personal connections, especially for the free agents that have leverage like Johnny Gaudreau did. And you sort of triangulate those things and make the best decision you can. And I think it's a good reminder in free agency. This is an individual decision for a lot of players too. Like, you can go back and we can question why anyone's motives are, but I mean, this is where he's comfortable and it's going to be an interesting one to reflect on. I actually thought back to that Panarin free agency because 3 years ago, it was the Blue Jackets in that spot. They were stretching themselves a little bit, probably beyond their comfort zone, trying to keep Panarin, just as Calgary was trying to keep Gaudreau. They were willing to go to $13 million a year for Panarin in 2019. Jeez. And he ends up signing $11.6 million in New York, which, it's not like it's a huge difference, but still they were willing to pay more than what he took. The same scenario happened here. Calgary was offering $10.5 million on an 8-year deal, $84 million total bucks. And he's taking 68.25, I think, on this deal. He's like losing $15 million. Sizable difference in total money, but I don't think this was a financial decision. This was a lifestyle and family decision.
So, how close were some of the other rumored teams in on this? So, I'm thinking of the New Jersey Devils. The New York Islanders were mentioned as well. Philadelphia was also floated. How close were those teams really to Johnny Gaudreau?
As far as I can tell, the Devils were the next closest. And, it's hard to handicap these things because, there's not a lot of incentive for anyone to be too honest about everything. But Philadelphia was never really in the game. That's something Chuck Fletcher mentioned to reporters down there, at his press avail. They just didn't create the room. They looked at trading James Van Riemsdyk. They obviously bought out Oscar Lindblom, but they never had the cap space to make something like this even get possible. So I don't think that got serious. The Islanders, we know who their general manager is. It's a bit of a lockbox. But at a certain point early in the afternoon, word started to circulate that they were out. And at that point, the Devils and Blue Jackets were still teams considered to be in. And so I don't have a play-by-play of exactly how it went down. But it would seem to me the Devils were probably the runner-up here, best as I can tell. And, they certainly had a desire for him. That they pivoted later in the night. They went and signed Andre Palat, which is not the same thing as Johnny Gaudreau, but obviously, that's a $30 million contract. It's a significant commitment from them. And so, they probably wouldn't have had the money to do both, I'm surmising. But yeah, I think that's kind of the run of play there. And a lot of this was just dictated by the fact that Gaudreau himself had Columbus on a short list and Columbus was interested. The Blue Jackets had tons of cap space. Now, all of a sudden, they got some decisions to make. There's negotiations ongoing with Patrick Laine, who's a restricted free agent. Best as I can tell there, they've not been close. At one point, someone said there's a canyon between them. But I still think there's room to get a deal done with him. And maybe there might be a little bit more incentive for Patrick Laine to get a deal done because, having someone like Johnny Gaudreau setting you up sure helped Sean Monahan over the years. I know they had a mutually beneficial relationship, but if you're a great shooter, you want to be playing with someone who sees the ice like Gaudreau does. And, I could see a lot of potential for a Laine Gaudreau, line built around those two.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, having those two players, great goal scorers on your top line, I mean, that looks pretty good for Columbus. I mean, gotta admit it, looks pretty cool.
This is so good for the NHL. Like, look at two of the biggest names yesterday. Claude Giroux goes to Ottawa, and obviously there's a personal family connection there. His wife's from there. He spends his off seasons there. But Ottawa on this day is getting to put out its chest and sign a big free agent. And Columbus is getting to put out its chest and sign a big free agent. I mean, two of the more maligned fan bases in the league at times, certainly in the Senators' case, they've been through a real downturn. Like for years, it just felt like every decision was made to save every 2 cents they could. Obviously the trading of Mark Stone and Erik Karlsson going way back, but everything just seemed to be about doing it, operating on a really crazy small budget. Whereas now this offseason, the Senators have been, one of the great stories for me. I mean, they're the one who splash out and get DeBrincat. They find a way to offload 75% of Matt Murray's cap hit. They make a bold move with the Talbot for Gustafsson trade. They're in talks to acquire a defenseman. They might not be a true cap team, but they're on the way to certainly spending more real money on players, actual players in their lineup, not just dead contracts and all that stuff, than they have been in years. And they're going to be better on the ice. And so I think the same could be said of Columbus. They're still a little ways away, but now you look at this. I mean, Gaudreau's a game-breaking type of player. I think he's got 6 most points over the last 8 seasons in the entire NHL. So he's one of the most productive offensive players in the game. They still got a decently solid blue line. Elvis Merzlikins is a good goaltender. I mean, they've got some parts here, and I think that they're not long for getting back into being a team sniffing around the playoffs in the Metro Division.
A great day to be from the city of Columbus, or just from the state of Ohio. Not the same if you are from the province of Alberta, notably in Calgary. What do the Flames do now? Brad Treliving looked beside himself at that press conference amidst all the free agent frenzy stuff on Wednesday. But what do they do with their roster now? What do you think is next for them?
The one thing I like that Brad Treliving said is we can't do anything in a direct sort of correlation to this. It can't be a reaction. It can't be going and allocating that cap space somewhere else that would have gone to Johnny Gaudreau. I mean, I think there has to be almost a reimagining of what the team can be. Ultimately, it might lead them to the decision of dismantling a little bit. I don't think they're there yet by any stretch. They have to see where talks go with Matthew Tkachuk, what he wants to do. But there's no getting around it. This was an awful day for the franchise in the moment. But the great news is, Julian, sometimes something beautiful grows out of a difficult time. Like there's opportunity here too, because yes, they lose a franchise icon. Had they signed him for $10.5 million for 8 years, I think they would have to continue to be all in on trying to win. That might not have been the best strategy. We're sort of playing the sliding doors game here. Who can know for sure, but that might have led them down a path that didn't get them where they want to go. And who knows, maybe this results in some sort of pivot and, they find an even better tomorrow. And so, I think the immediate thing they have to do is figure out Tkachuk. He's got a qualifying offer in front of him. It's $9 million. It's a 1-year qualifying offer. He has until July 22nd at 5 p.m. Eastern time to decide if he's taking it. Of course, he's going to take it if they haven't negotiated another contract since, because that 1-year qualifying offer, first of all, $9 million is a raise for him, or it's a good amount of money for him. And then it walks him straight to unrestricted free agency next summer, or at least the possibility of it. I imagine in the meantime that the Flames will redouble their efforts to seeing about signing him long-term. And then we go from there. But, Tkachuk's you could not be in a more advantageous position than he is. He just came off the best year of his career. He's got this qualifying offer that he'll be happy to play on. He can just sit and watch and see what the Flames do and listen. And, I think the truth is you're just not replacing Johnny Gaudreau. There's just no way around it. Not by a free agency, not even by trade at this point in time. I think that, it might be a step back before a step forward in Calgary, but, they're still getting organized after the earthquake. Like I don't think they've charted their path or figured it out just yet.
Yeah. I mean, I feel for Flames fans who, this was a team that I genuinely thought was going to go on a deep run this past postseason. And then they lose the way that they did to Edmonton. And I wonder if they had won that series, if that would have made any difference at all in Johnny Gaudreau staying in Calgary. But he's gone now. And he's in Columbus. I feel bad for Flames fans.
I feel like if they won the Stanley Cup, if they got to the Cup final and lost, if they lost in round 1, I don't think it's a different outcome here. I really believe this wasn't about him not liking Calgary. I think he's going to, we haven't seen his remarks yet, but I think he's very sincere in everything he said about Calgary, that he's part of that organization for 11, 12 years. one of its best individual performers ever on the ice for that franchise. He grew up there, but he's entering a different phase. It reminds me a little bit of John Tavares. I mean, it's not a perfect comparison, but when Tavares moved back to Toronto, it came at a time when him and his wife were starting a family. Maybe some of his priorities had changed. It was his first chance to dictate where he played, essentially. And, he chose the comforts of literally his hometown. I think for Gaudreau, there's more comfort being on the East Coast, closer to family. Again, him and his wife are starting a family, and you can imagine the added need there. Like, it's an opportunity. Like, the one thing, I don't blame any. If a Flames fan is pissed off about this, that's fine. Like, you've earned that right. You invested your energy, your time, maybe your money into caring about, Johnny and the team. And if you're angry, you have that right. But in general, I would instruct people to take a step back and remember, a player has to play at least 7 years pro hockey to even get the chance to choose another team. Johnny Gaudreau this season had to play out the final year of his deal. Like, if he got injured this year, maybe he's not signing a $68 million contract in free agency. Like, if it was a serious enough injury, he had to take a certain degree of risk. He had to bet on himself. He had a marvelous season, 115 points, and he set himself up for this opportunity. So on a human level, I don't think we can blame someone for doing that. I think a career is short in pro sports. You only get probably one chance to make this decision, and he had to get it right. And so I don't think there's really anything Calgary could have done. Calgary did everything you would want. I mean, they offered the man $84 million. In the NHL on one guaranteed contract, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money, Julian. I don't think we can doubt their commitment to him or trying to make this work. It's just, Johnny had control of the situation, and he chose what he wanted.
Yeah, that's exactly what he did, CJ. It's time for us to do our You Can Bet That segment with Sports Interaction. David Bastel's not with us, but CJ and I think we're capable of handling it, even though CJ is very clearly in summer vacation mode. I tried very hard not to acknowledge your outfit.
I was going to say, how deep are we in the pod? And you haven't even mentioned how ridiculous my
I tried to just let you cook, man. Bucket hat seat. For those listening, he's wearing a white bucket hat. The sunglasses are on. There's a palm tree behind him. He's wearing this summer, short sleeve, blue shirt. CJ just doesn't give a damn today, clearly.
Well, let me tell you, it was a busy week or whatever leading up to free agency, obviously, since the draft, but I had to go acquire props to make this happen. So,
oh my God.
It's not like I had all this stuff on hand just around the house to put on. So you got your Stanley Cup prop over your shoulder there, your Muhammad Ali picture on the wall. I'm out here getting goofy props because I am in summer vacation mode.
Okay, let's get to Sports Interaction before we really get into summer vacation mode here. If you play Sports Interaction 19+, we ask that you play responsibly, and there is a link to responsible gaming strategies in the description of this show. Welcome to You Can Bet That with David Bastel. Oh, David Bastel's not here, so I guess it's just going to have to be CJ and myself. I'll remember to hit up Sport. He can't be here. Apparently, he's very busy, as it seems. That being said, you don't need him to hit up sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all of your gaming needs. Earlier this week, we discussed the odds for who could win the Stanley Cup next year. Obviously, they've changed. Some of the teams, anyway. It has changed with some of the free agent moves. Not necessarily at the top. First and second best odds still belong to Colorado and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Third place for a while, it looked as if it would be the Florida Panthers. That has changed now. They have fallen to fourth place. The Calgary Flames have also fallen. I think they had the seventh best odds. They've now fallen to ninth. Ottawa's odds have risen into the top 18 list of teams. They're right there at 18. There's a handful of teams that have improved their odds in the last day or so off of the free agent moves.
There have. I'm based on the reaction in Toronto to the Matt Murray acquisition. I'm surprised they're still second because you'd think that the Leafs were going to be a playoff team based on some of what I'm hearing in the city I live in. Kind of interesting seeing which teams climb and fall. I mean, look, Florida didn't have the cap space to be a real factor in free agency, not to the degree it would have wanted. They pushed their chips in at the deadline, and unfortunately, there's a price to pay for that. and Ottawa climbing into the top half. I got a brother-in-law in Ottawa, and I know he's pretty fired up. I'm sure he's representative of what's going on down there.
I'll also mention this with Columbus before we wrap up. On Monday, they were at 107. Those were some of the odds that they had in order to win the Stanley Cup. The only other teams that were worse than them were the Canadiens and the Arizona Coyotes. They have since risen to 62.1. So they're better, obviously. A few more teams are behind them, but to the Columbus Blue Jackets, obviously getting slightly better odds now that they have Johnny Gaudreau in the fold for the next how many years.
I wonder how many people placed a prop bet that he would go to Columbus. I'm guessing it's a small amount, if any, but I would have liked to know the odds from that, because none of us were going to call that one.
I feel the same. I wonder, someone somewhere is like dancing with like how many thousands of dollars because they bet on Johnny Gaudreau going to the Columbus Blue Jackets. I certainly didn't make that bet, and CJ didn't make that bet, but hey, you can make some bets at sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. Don't forget to check them out for all the best odds before game, in game, and the best props. Again, sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. Johnny Gaudreau obviously wasn't the only move that took place on Wednesday. A lot of different addresses changing for some other players. Siege, what other deals stood out to you the most on Wednesday?
How do you define stood out to me? Like surprised me, or like, because I think you can dig into, like you can dig into some surprising contracts, but you have to get in the weeds through that. Like seeing Charlie Lindgren, it's a great story. Played only 5 NHL games last season and has a handful on his resume. He gets a 3-year deal to be the Capitals backup, $1.1 million, well earned, had a long AHL playoff run too. But, that's maybe one that's surprising. Or Matthew Benning getting a 4-year contract in San Jose. He's never had that kind of security before. The Eric Gudbranson deal got a lot of attention. That was the first big deal in Columbus before Gaudreau kind of wiped it out of everyone's mind. But him getting 4 years and $4 million, that's a surprise. Maybe a little bit surprised to see Palat move on from the Lightning, just because that organization has been able to do such a good job of not having that happen with their sort of core guys. And, obviously 11 years inside the organization, he's played for just one coach his whole career, John Cooper, starting with him in Norfolk back in the AHL days. So that'll be a big change for him, going up to New Jersey on that 5-year contract. But I can kind of, like, if we look at the bigger players, nothing there really, really surprised me. I mean, I guess because we knew about a lot of it, we had strong indications that Campbell was going to Edmonton and Kemper was going to Washington, and even that Andrew Kopp would sign in Detroit. Maybe the term on Vincent Trocheck's 7-year deal with the Rangers surprised me a little bit. The term was how they made that deal work, though, because it kept the AAV under $6 million. And, obviously the Rangers are gearing up to be a team. I mean, they're contender now. They, had a pretty long playoff run, and want to remain one for the foreseeable future. But, it was a pretty sensible day. And I would say if there's a general observation of the market, the middle class got squeezed pretty quickly. And, there's some pretty good players as we're recording this that are still unsigned. I look at a guy like Nino Niederreiter, for example. John Klingberg. I think the market wasn't where he and his agent would have hoped. I think that's at one point he was hoping to get a 7-year deal on the open market. I'd be surprised if that was out there for them now. And so we're just seeing the effects, the run-on effects of a flat cap. I know it's boring to say. The cool thing is the expectation is in a couple of years, we're going to see a big jump in the cap, and then we'll probably see all sorts of like wacky looking deals in that moment. It'll seem crazy. Money will be getting thrown around everywhere, but it's still a pretty sensible day, all things considered. And it's not a comfortable spot, I can tell you. If it's fine for Nazem Kadri, he takes an extra day or however long it takes because he's making a decision. He's going to be okay. But if you're sort of in the middle class or the third tier of free agents, it gets uncomfortable really quickly because there's just not a lot of money out there for contending teams to spend.
At the risk of our podcast sounding dated with when it comes to Nazem Kadri, as of this morning when we're recording, still available out there. I just have this weird feeling he's going to go back to Colorado, considering some of the teams that have taken themselves off the board with some of the free agent signings they've made. I'm thinking of like a Rangers or a Detroit. I wonder if he ends up just taking whatever money is available left to him in Colorado instead of going somewhere else.
Well, that's the $1 million question, or maybe $50 million question, depending on what kind of term Nazem's signing. But, the one thing that he said from the beginning and meant it, that he was hoping to do a deal with Colorado. Now, that's a tough thing for them to do. That, they re-signed Nichushkin, they re-signed Josh Manson, they extended Arturi Lehkonen. So they spent some money keeping some of the key parts of that Cup team together. And I just don't know if there's enough there for Kadri, because remember, they're also going to sign Nathan MacKinnon here to an extension that doesn't kick in until 2023, but it's going to be a big jump on what's been a huge value contract in the league for years on MacKinnon. I mean, he might make twice as much on the next deal. And so, it's hard to know, but the way the sides have left things is that the Kadri camp would sort of check in with the Avalanche. If it was going to make a decision, maybe give them the last best chance to stay, that kind of thing. And so, you're right. There's some of the obvious landing spots did go away on them. I wondered about Detroit just because it was so close to his hometown of London. They had a need, trying to build out a much better second line, which I think they've done with the moves that they made, Andrew Kopp being the most notable among them. But yeah, it was it's a good spot for Kadri in some ways, because I think he gets a chance to digest it. It's so hard for some of the guys down the market, though. Like they're making a call on where they're going to live in some cases, in a matter of minutes or an hour. And so, if you're one of the top players in the market, I think you can get a sense where you're going early, but then everything kind of unfolds like a cascading set of decisions from there. And I would say Kadri's still in a fortunate position, even if there's not a ton of money out there, because he's going to end up with a great contract and playing somewhere he's comfortable with.
Seattle, Calgary, maybe as a consolation prize. Anybody else in those sweepstakes?
I don't know if Calgary has the money. I mean, they could do it. Don't get me wrong, but they have less money than it looks like if you dial up Puckpedia or Cap Friendly. Because they got $9 million that you would think is earmarked for Tkachuk. I would say Mangiapane's deal, based on people I've talked to, is probably ending up somewhere 5 to 6 range. So for just round numbers, let's even say it's the low end of that. That's still $14 million. They still have Oliver Shillington to sign. And at that point, you got what, $3 or $4 million left over. Now, maybe there's a trade to be made or another way to make it work. I'm certainly not saying they can't do it, but it's not maybe as apparent or as easy as it looks if you just look at one of those sites. Now, the other part too is that Kadri has to want to go there, and I don't know whether he does or he doesn't, but we do know for a fact he was traded there in 2019 and refused to waive a no trade clause to go. Now, there was other factors that time. I think he was still hoping blocking that trade, he might stay a Leaf. But in the past, he had a chance to go to be a member of the Flames and wasn't. So yeah, there's not a lot of other, open spots. I could see Seattle doing it, but they also made their own signings, right? They gave money to Burakovsky in free agency. And so, it's getting late early, I'm sure, but I'm confident he's got a couple offers that he's looking at, and it's just a matter of figuring out what's best for he and his family.
Another move I that stood out to me, and I understand that it was kind of not really telegraphed, but a lot of people were hoping that it would happen. It ended up coming to fruition. Claude Giroux going to the Ottawa Senators, arguably the most notable person to ever come out of Hearst, Ontario. Yes, that's a shot at our friend Pierre LeBrun. But yeah, him going to the Ottawa Senators, and looks as if he might be able to at least play out the twilight of his career relatively close to home. By the way, Hearst and Ontario, nowhere near close, like 11 hours between Hearst and Ottawa. Like that's a lot. Like what do you do in Hearst?
I don't have an answer to that. I mean, we need to get Pierre on the pod for a lot of reasons, but
we should.
I think it's like a lot of places. You play hockey or sports. I mean, it's an outdoorsy place, but it's far. I've never been up that far, right? I've literally traveled around the world. I've been to Russia like 5 times, and I've never been to truly what people would say Northern Ontario. So, it's a place, even if you're from Ontario, you don't necessarily get to. I mean, obviously you could visit I guess you could take a trip up there if you were into camping or fishing or whatever. Or some people see it because they drive across the country, and it's the way to get to Manitoba is going up and around the Great Lakes. But yeah, it's far away. A lot of people in Hearst end up in Ottawa. Hearst is a Franco-Ontario town, as Pierre Lebrun is, as Claude Giroux is, so they speak French. Ottawa is a pretty bilingual city in Canada. So I do know a lot of people from Northern Ontario end up in Ottawa. Pierre himself went to Carleton University in Ottawa. So there's a lot of ties between the two places. But yeah, it's up there, bud. We should take a road trip there. Maybe we got some CJ Show fans up in Northern Ontario.
I was about to say, if we're taking a road trip up to Hearst, Ontario, that is going to be a very fun bus ride at this point. You have to get the entire SDPN in one of those big Sprinter buses driving up to Hearst. If people are out there.
Among the SDPN crew, who would we have drive that bus? Like, who would we trust most to get us places and not get lost? And
Jesse or Adam? I don't want Jesse. To know. Jesse might be the person. Adam might drive Jesse. I'll say Jesse, final answer. He's just the most responsible person at the SDPN.
Yeah, I feel like as long as you have Jesse there, everything's under control. Everybody else, it could turn into Lord of the Flies, but Jesse will just keep order by just his mere presence. Is
it kind of funny that neither of us considered Steve at all for this?
Oh no.
No, we just said no. I love Steve, but no.
He's got his name on the network and he's got his legion of followers well earned, but I'm not putting him in charge of anything else.
No, absolutely not. Okay, but Claude Giroux going to the Ottawa Senators. That's still a pretty cool signing, capping off what has been a great offseason for Pierre Davion so far.
Yeah, it's a seal of approval signing. That's what it is, right? It's proof that what the Senators have done and plan to do is being seen the right way, because Claude Giroux could have went and played for teams that had a much better winning percentage than Ottawa did last year, that have maybe much higher ambitions of winning a Stanley Cup. And I think by him going there, it shows that he thinks that they're closer than maybe it might appear if you only just were to sort by the NHL standings the last few seasons. And you can see why I would think that. They got some great young players in that organization. I know it hasn't all come together to this point. They feel that they've gotten a goaltending position solidified now. I think with Anton Forsberg and Cam Talbot, a veteran to kind of stabilize things there. In my view, they still have to improve their blue line, and that's something Pierre Dorion is trying to do. So, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. I'm certainly not predicting they're a Stanley Cup contender next season, but in a very difficult division, the Atlantic, they've definitely taken a step forward with their group. And, I think Giroux means a lot, just sort of intangibly. But he also scored 0.8 points per game or something in that neighborhood last season. So he's going to help. He's going to help their team in a direct way. But it means something. I don't know if you saw the video. He had his son Gavin come into the Canadian Tire Center yesterday when he signed his contract. That video, first of all, it was 3 minutes of just nothing but wholesome content, taking his son around, seeing the Zamboni, getting a hug from Spartacat, being part of his press conference that he had with the reporters there. But it's also, let's give these organizations their due, and especially their fans that have been through a lot, that they get to celebrate getting a player like that. I think it's really cool for that franchise, and it's great for Claude, because he's he does make his family home there in the off season. Doesn't have to move come September. He's just going to be staying right where he is.
Yeah, I like it for Ottawa, because just with what they've gone through over the last how many years with trying to rebuild this team to get back into being into the playoffs, and obviously all the behind the scenes stuff with Evgeni Malkin. It's been a bit of a weird time to be an Ottawa Senators fan, and to see the product on the ice get to a point where they actually look pretty cool. I don't think they're a cup contending team all of a sudden, but I do think they're going to be a fighter for a playoff spot next year. And that's great.
You've got to take them seriously now. Right. And, I think they've been trending towards that. This last season just didn't go the way they wanted. I think that they thought they were ready for that step this last season. It didn't happen. But now the way they're operating, it feels like it has to happen. It feels like there's an urgency from the front office, bringing better players in. And, I have to believe that's going to flood into the dressing room and on the ice. I mean, who knows what results will be? I mean, so often the teams that we say win free agency or win the offseason don't win enough games the next year. It doesn't always equate. It doesn't always come together in the right way. But I do think that they've put themselves in a position where they've earned our attention. and let's see how they build this thing out. And again, I don't think their offseason's done by any stretch. I mean, they traded Connor Brown away on Wednesday to Washington for a second round pick. They're well armed to make a subsequent move on the blue line. And what that is, I think, can help dictate the success of the operation, because they just weren't deep enough in their top six last year to really compete with, the heavies in the division, the Tampas and the Bostons and the Torontos. But I think that they should feel better about their position now.
One other team I want to focus on, the Carolina Hurricanes. They were quite busy yesterday. They end up getting Brent Burns, 37 years old. And I believe the Sharks are retaining some of his salary as well over the duration of that contract, as much as left as on it anyway. And they get Max Pacioretty essentially for free, even though, yes, Vegas needs to clear salary, but they get a 30-goal scorer for free in Max Pacioretty, and Dylan Coughlin also involved in that deal. What do you think of what Don Waddell was doing in Carolina yesterday?
This is one of the best run organizations in the entire league. I don't know how anyone could conclude otherwise. And I know they haven't, won anything of consequence, under this regime, but they've consistently now been one of the better regular season teams. They've been right there in the playoffs when they lose a game 7 to Boston this past year. And I just think that they don't do things in a conventional manner.
You mean the Rangers, not Boston? Carolina lost to Boston in game 7.
Oh no, the Rangers. Sorry, yeah.
The Rangers. Yeah, they beat Boston. They beat Boston in game 7. They lost to the Rangers in game 7. I just noticed.
Correcting my CJ Holiday brain.
No worries.
But the point stands here, though, that they don't take an obvious approach to anything. And so they negotiated with Tony DeAngelo, a restricted free agent. It wasn't getting to where they were comfortable paying. They unload him to Philadelphia for 3 draft picks. They, had some interest in keeping Vincent Trocheck and Nino Niederreiter at a certain point, but they let those guys go to market. And guess what that did? That allowed them to have the cap space to make the kind of trades that they made. They also went and tried to get Mason Marchment too. And I think that they believe they had him at one point. And, let's call this as it is. I mean, Mason Marchment, no one could be in his shoes. He's lost his dad in the last week. He's facing a big career decision. He ends up going to Dallas, where he knows the coaching staff well, and I think will create a comfortable environment. But after that, the Hurricanes are able to pivot. And, you add it all up, and it's like they're playing 3D chess, because, even the Burns deal, they're getting him. There's some risk there with his age, and it is 3 years, but it's 66% of his contract. So it's not the full hit. They really didn't give up a whole lot. There's a goaltending prospect and a fourth liner, Steven Lorentz, and a conditional 3rd round pick. And remember, they picked up 3 extra picks for DeAngelo already this offseason. They get Brent Burns, who I think will fit in great with their structure. Then they go and the deal you talk about with the Golden Knights, I mean, it's just a cap dump, but it's a cap dump of a good player. Max Pacioretty is still a good player. And they get a 24-year-old defenseman that they like in Dylan Coughlin, right shot. We'll see what he becomes. But this team just seems to always have great defensemen. Like that, they play so well structurally. And, they've managed to lose Dougie Hamilton, but, find ways to replace him. In this case, they lose Tony DeAngelo, find ways to replace him. I think that they deserve a whole lot of credit for the way they do business. I know some people don't like it because they're more reluctant than others to say give out big long-term contracts. Like, they're willing to let you move on if you're not willing to play at their price, but they just consistently find good players and find creative ways to patch holes. And then they get Andre Kasha at the end of the day, Julian, $1.5 million. I realize there's risk there. He's been very injured. He even had, a concussion at the end of last season with the Maple Leafs, but they get him at a contract. They didn't even outbid the Leafs for him. Like, they lured him from Toronto for the same deal the Leafs were offering. So, I think there's just a lot of good that's happened there. This is example of a product of a lot of good small decisions lead to a much bigger successful piece. And that's what I see their organization as. And I think they're going to be a top team next year.
Yeah. I mean, they've been a top team the last little while. I don't see them getting any lower than where they're at right now. I see them probably even getting higher. Yeah. That Andre Kasha deal, some guy on TSN announced that. I'm trying to remember who it was.
Must have been Pierre LeBrun.
Yeah. Must have been Pierre LeBrun. What about the Toronto Maple Leafs? A lot of talk about their goaltending situation the last few days. They get Matt Murray, and the whole Twitter world in Toronto goes aflame. Then they get Ilya Samsonov, and they sign him to a 1-year deal, and that's not so bad. But they essentially have 2 reclamation projects in net. What do you think of how Kyle Dubas has rolled the dice with these two goalies?
Well, it depends how you define risk, right? Some might define risk as giving a 5-year deal to a 30-year-old goaltender in free agency. And that's what Edmonton did by signing Jack Campbell, and that's what Washington did by signing Darcy Kemper. And, what the Leafs essentially chose is just to not participate in that market, to not be part of that. And time will tell if it was a smart decision. None of us know with certainty now. But what they did instead, I think, is at least somewhat sensible. Ilya Samsonov is a first-round pick. He's 25 years old. He did have a season in Washington where he had a .913 save percentage. So, he's shown he can do it in spurts, and he certainly has a lot of pedigree. It didn't go well for him last year. And so you get him on a 1-year deal at less than $2 million. I mean, there's not a lot of risk in that deal whatsoever. And, the Matt Murray deal, I think that some of the conjecture around it is misplaced. The Ottawa Senators had another deal for Matt Murray in their back pocket. They were only retaining 25% of his salary in that second deal. They were only retaining 25% of his salary in the original Buffalo deal that got nixed. And they were only going to ever get to 25% of his salary with the Leafs. And so the Leafs take him at 25%. I realize why there's categorical risk here, but he's 28. He's younger than Jack Campbell. He's younger than Darcy Kemper, and he's only 2 years left on the contract. I don't know if this will work out. I agree with anyone who says that the front office, to a certain degree, is putting its jobs on the line with this set of decisions because it's that important to them. But I can understand how they got to the place where they made those choices. And, really the bet comes down to these two guys with upside that are younger on shorter, less money contracts versus a more established player who's older, who could be, fall off a cliff at some point, performance-wise, could have injury problems of their own, locking in on 5 years. And so I think with where the Leafs are at, it's sensible, but now they got to make it work. They got a new goalie coach in Curtis Sanford, and if it doesn't work, they will be second-guessed, rightfully so. Kyle Dubas has never quite got the goaltending mix right with this team. A lot of his decisions at that position just haven't worked out for various reasons. And so there's a lot of pressure to get this one right, but I understand how they got to it.
Absolutely. Also, any final thoughts on Edmonton? We've kind of mentioned a few times that Jack Campbell has moved on to Edmonton. Evander Kane also staying with the Oilers as well. Any general final thoughts before we move on to other topics with the Oilers?
I would say it was a sensible free agency for the Oilers. They keep Brett Kulak on a 4-year deal, $2.75 million. He was really steady for them after he came over at the deadline for Montreal. That's a sensible move. That's not a get crazy with the money or term kind of move. Even Evander Kane, a little over $5 million on his deal, 4-year commitment. That's not crazy, right? There's people out there saying Evander Kane needed a 7-year deal. Well, that to me would never have made sense. But a 4-year contract with how well it worked for him, I think it's a sensible approach to free agency. And then, there's definitely risk involved in the Campbell signing. But let's take the other side of the coin that I just took for the Leafs. I mean, the Oilers have tried the last 2 off seasons to get a goaltender. They tried on Jacob Markstrom in 2020. They tried to trade for Darcy Kemper in 2021 in the summer. They missed on both. This time there was no option. Mike Smith's not able to play next year because he's so banged up physically. Koskinen's moved on to Switzerland. They have Stuart Skinner, who they like, but it's still a bit of a question mark about what kind of load he can handle and what he's going to give you. And so they had to get, I think, a more solidified position there. They did a lot of homework on Jack Campbell. That much I know. They talked to Zach Hyman. They talked to other former members of the Leafs organization, and they're comfortable with where they ended up. I think it's all around, it's sensible. And I actually like their free agency. I think they did pretty well. Now we'll just see, can they move on from Jesse Puljujarvi? I know there was talks for them to maybe get Connor Brown before he went to Washington. I'm not sure that they're fully done there, but on a day when teams make a lot of mistakes financially, I don't think they made any clear financial errors.
Oh, that's well said. Actually, I lied about that being the last thing. There's one player I just want to mention, just because he's staying in the market that he's staying in, ruining any opportunity of him doing a heel turn, going to Washington or some other market that would have seen him in a different uniform. Evgeni Malkin staying in Pittsburgh. Why did it play out the way that it did? It looked as if he had wanted. I mean, it was getting out there that he obviously wanted terms his way with Pittsburgh. It really looked as if he was going to test the market and go somewhere else. What happened?
Well, these sides played hardball with each other. That's what happened. I mean, the Penguins didn't just capitulate and say, "Hey, you're a franchise legend. We'll give you a piece of paper. You write down the numbers, and we'll sign it." They had a true negotiation with the player, and the player subsequently got upset by that, as is his right, and said he's going to test market. And then when the emotions went down, and they found a path to a deal. I think it's life as it should be. Makes a lot of sense. I think Evgeni Malkin in his heart didn't truly want to go somewhere else. And ultimately, I think when you're a player in free agency, you have to be really honest about what outcome you want most, and what your priorities are. And so, we'll see how things go down. He's got a no move clause in there, but we have a scenario now where you might see Sidney Crosby, Evgeni Malkin, and Chris Letang play their final years all out together, basically have entirely shared careers with one organization. They won 3 Stanley Cups together. They lost a 4th chance at winning the title. They won a whole bunch of games. They have the longest active playoff streak. It sort of feels like how it should be. 3 pillars of that organization. I don't know how much longer they can sustain it. Every year, I think this is the year they fall off. Every year, Sidney Crosby laughs at God's plan and somehow wills this team to getting back into the playoffs. It's clear they don't have a contention window forever, but they can at least talk themselves into one for another season.
If you really think about it, for the Pittsburgh Penguins, these last 2 years, if it wasn't for goaltending, they probably win like at least 1 or 2 rounds in each of those years.
And Crosby's injury against the Rangers. I mean, I think he was for that period of time, he was back to being sort of like peak Crosby. And I think you see this with a lot of great athletes, or like special generational athletes. As time goes on and some of their skills fade or their abilities dim, they can still summon it in moments. I mean, Tiger Woods won a Masters, for example, kind of out of the blue after everything he'd been through. Like it can come together for periods of time. And unfortunately for Pittsburgh, it was coming together for Sidney Crosby. He was a wrecking ball in that series. Like nobody could stop him. And unfortunately, he got injured and left the series, and they didn't find a way to win games to keep, allow him to get healthy and get back. For me, you're right. Goaltending 2 years ago, especially, but last year or this past playoffs, I think a healthy Crosby, and they got to the second round at minimum.
Exactly. Busy time in the free agent period for a lot of these different teams, obviously still ongoing. We'll be obviously updating it as long as we're doing episodes before the end of this season. Guys like Nazem Kadri still very much out there as of this recording, but entirely possible that could change. A bit of a tough transition here, Siege. Just want to take some time to acknowledge the latest development with Hockey Canada, as they released an open letter to Canadians on Thursday morning, really early Thursday morning. And essentially the biggest note from that open letter is that Hockey Canada says that they are reopening the investigation into the alleged assault that they say was perpetrated by members of the 2018 national junior team. They say they use the word specifically perpetrated. Hockey Canada also says that they will require all high performance players, coaches, team staff, and volunteers to participate in mandatory sexual violence and consent training. They will also conduct a full governance review of Hockey Canada. There's a few other things in the note as well that, again, was released very early Thursday morning. CJ, what do you think? What are your general thoughts on the letter and the fact that Hockey Canada is reopening that investigation?
Well, it's a sign that they've heard quite clearly the concerns that stem all the way up to the top levels of government in Canada, but have also been voiced by a number of other Canadians and people that are around this story. I think another part of the letter, Julian, that's worth highlighting is they say they're going to reopen the investigation here, that participation with a third-party investigator, that participation will be required by all members of the team, and anyone who chooses not to participate will essentially be barred from any sort of Hockey Canada related activities and presumably national teams down the road. And so, this is an acknowledgement that they didn't do enough on the first go round. I don't think they can change that. I'm not going to clap for them and say good job, but you also have to acknowledge this does seem like there's some tangible steps in here that aren't just words, that aren't just a press release. This is the opposite of what we would call a news dump in our industry too. By releasing it at 6 a.m., everybody can digest it for the entirety of the day, right? I mean, it can be properly covered in any way that any media outlet would wish to cover it. And so I think that this is them having more transparency into their process. We'll see what becomes of that investigation. I still don't want to speculate on what the punishments might be, who the players are. I don't think that's entirely fair at this point in time. But it's a sign that they've taken it seriously. And let's call it as it is. They were given no choice. Like a number of their top sponsors pulled funding, and they were again questioned, in the House of Commons. So at the top levels of leadership, and so they were forced to get to this position. But they did get there, and let's see what comes next.
Yeah, we'll have to see that. I will say this though. I mean, to your point about Hockey Canada realizing they had no choice to do this, and perhaps this is a little bit more sincere than just putting out a press release. We have to also acknowledge this does come after all those sponsors either pulled out or just withheld their funding. There is that out there as well. That has to be acknowledged.
Sure. And there's a World Junior tournament coming up in August in Edmonton. So in their own backyard. And so there's a need, I think, to figure out how this is all going to go, because you can't just cruise into that tournament and pretend nothing happened. It's not that this year's team, I'm not meaning to directly link it to whatever happened a few years ago, but you can't miss that the same people are in charge of running the two programs. And so you're happy to see this. It had to happen. And I'm going to reserve more sort of judgment on this until we see what comes of it next, because it feels like a real actual step in the right direction, but only time will tell and reveal to us if it was.
Yeah. And just like you, it's really tough to speculate on what the punishment will be for this sort of thing. I think I'm going to prefer just to wait it out and see what it is. But I am very intrigued about what that punishment is going to be. But we will follow the story as long as it is out there and as long as we are able to cover it. So, yeah, we'll definitely, I'm glad we were able to take a few moments in the show to talk about it. Bit of a tough transition out of it, but a very necessary story to discuss. And we are nearing the end of the show, and I know we have stick taps left to do, but I would like to know, since this was your first ever free agent frenzy with the red team, you spent a lot of time with the blue team. Oh, the sunglasses are coming back. What was it like for you? The bucket hat is coming back too. Okay. So vacation. I just mentioned the fact that the show's almost over and CJ is already getting himself back into vacation mode. What was it like working with TSN yesterday?
It was awesome, man. What a well-oiled machine. Like these guys, I don't want anything to be misconstrued like I'm throwing shade at Sportsnet, because I'm not. And I worked there for 9 years. Like you have to understand, I love my time at Sportsnet. They gave me opportunities I've never had previously in the industry, to be on TV, to be part of trade deadline days and free agent days. But I do have to say, I just feel very comfortable having made that switch. And look, it comes after working there for 10 months or 11 months, whatever it's been. So, naturally I feel comfortable, but I'm truly impressed by how organized they are. We order our lunch in advance and it comes with your name on it. Like everything is just like, it's like they've been doing this for 100 years, and it's because they've been doing it for 100 years. I love how Bob McKenzie just rolls in out of semi-retirement and just drops bombs everywhere. Well, at least giving the outward impression, and that's even like me sitting beside him the entire day, that he's only working at quarter speed, because that's where he's at in his life, but he's earned that chance. But he's still breaking some big stories. He was the first one, I believe, to say on air that to connect Gaudreau to Columbus. It was earlier in the day. It wasn't a saying he's going there, but he was the first one to start to float that. And of course, that becomes the biggest story of the day well after we're off air. But he's always planting the seeds. Just a real pleasure to work with those people. And honestly, it's been a great season with them. I'm really grateful for them having me on the team, and it was a cool day. I think we did okay on, it's hard to evaluate the day, because when I'm in it, you're just so focused on the minutia and you're hammering everyone with texts and whatnot. But it felt like we had a pretty good day getting our share of the news, and we had a lot of fun doing it.
What did you think of the kids with those sticks, the ones who were flipping the pucks around, the ones from Waterloo or whatever?
The Klein twins.
Twins.
It was insane. Like, to see it in person is actually nuts. Like someone said to one of them, I think it might've been off air. Like, how long do you practice? And it's like, they used to practice for hours a day to get to the point to do that. Look, and I get it's sort of a distraction, a gimmick, but like, it's a long day. I think the one thing none of us should take any of this too seriously. Obviously we take seriously trying to get the news. We're trying to be first. We're competing, with Kevin Weeks and Emily Kaplan and Frank Saravalli and everyone out there that breaks news. Obviously Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick at Sportsnet, but we're all in the entertainment business. We're all in the business to some degree of selling hockey and selling interest in the National Hockey League. And so I like seeing those kids in there. And honestly, it's insane that they can do that. But just further proof, if you spend enough time trying to do something, you can master it.
Also, one thing I was hoping would happen during the Trade Center broadcast, and I don't think it happened at all during the free agent frenzy. And I understand because you're busy trying to break trades and free agent stuff. I would love it if TSN would just let you do like a skit or something.
A skit?
Yeah.
Dude, like, you barely even want to go to the bathroom on a day like that. Like, you don't, not to be weird, but I just mean, like, even at one point they came out to take our picture. Like, there's like, I guess probably a in-house promotional photo. And like, it's annoying to have to like sit up and pose for a photo because like, you're so into it. And we have one job, right? Like, there's a lot of people on that set. You got Ray Ferraro and Mike Johnson and Cheryl Pounder and Haley Salvian. And like, there's a lot of people, Carlo Koliakovo, entertaining around our bit, but our bit is very specific at that table. Like, we are just trying to get news. We are literally just trying to figure out who's signing where and for how much and what it means, and relaying that to those around us. So when that's your job and there's so much happening, I don't know what the final total was on signings, but it was a lot. It's hard to even think about doing anything else. So skit, we'd have to tape the skit in advance is my point, I guess, and maybe air it during the show, but there's no way Bob McKenzie would be part of a skit. And he sets the tone for our entire group.
I don't see any problem with like recording that skit like before the show. Like, y'all, like, what if you guys did like, you ever see the movie Anchorman?
Yes.
Like, recreate that scene where they have all the different anchors from all those stations like fighting each other, and just have all those different people you just mentioned who sit at different tables all come together in some like fight to the death outside like the TSN parking lot.
That actually would be awesome. I feel like I know Elliot well enough to say Elliot would be down for, like, he said, I'm not saying for an actual fight, but he would be in for like taping that. I doubt our bosses would be down for it.
Yeah.
But if we went rogue and did it on our own, that'd be pretty good.
That'd be hilarious. Like, I think the hockey Twitter world would love you. Speaking of the hockey Twitter world, I don't know if you realize, I think you might have at one point, but I decided to take a photo of you during your broadcast when you were talking about Andre Burakovsky signing with Seattle. And I put up the caption, "Which prominent hockey insider is this? Wrong answers only."
I saw that our fans showed up because there's a few PJ Stock answers in there. They clearly listened to the last episode.
Oh man, I loved it. A lot of people say PJ Stock. One guy in particular, Aaron Hempel. I don't know, but he signed my Bruins hockey puck for some reason. That was so good. Someone suggested you were Adrian Wojnarowski, the ESPN reporter for the NBA side, a different sport. Nicolas Cage. Someone said Nicolas Cage. A lot of people suggested Ewan McGregor, aka Obi-Wan Kenobi. I see the resemblance.
Is that a compliment, do you think? Or
yeah, why wouldn't it be a compliment? Why wouldn't it be a compliment?
I don't know. I don't know if there's like some, because you're meant to like help me with the pop culture aspects of the world. So I don't know if there's like,
come on, you don't know what Star Wars is?
I didn't watch any of the new ones. No.
What do you mean? Did you watch any of the old ones?
Yeah, when I was a kid, like the original Star Wars, I saw. But I didn't watch the newer ones that came out.
Okay, fine. So you haven't watched the ones with Ewan McGregor in it, nor have you watched the actual Disney Plus series Obi-Wan Kenobi that has Ewan McGregor reprising the role.
I know you don't believe me. I'm not kidding. I have not watched a movie in years, like not one single movie.
I still can't believe that. Like
it's not an exaggeration. I'm not like saying that, but like, oh yeah, I went last week and saw Top Gun Maverick or something. Like I literally have not watched one in years. If there's one I want to watch, it's actually the new Top Gun.
Yes, go watch Top Gun Maverick. Again, not a promo. We don't have any ads with them or anything. Go watch Top Gun Maverick.
Well, maybe that'll give me something to report back on when we have our summer episodes, because I think the hockey news is going to get pretty quiet here pretty quick. So maybe we'll turn into like CJ and Julian's pop culture corner.
I love that idea. We should do this. A pop culture corner plus we take in questions from everybody, just literally anything that doesn't have to do with hockey, anything you want. We do that as an episode. We're building that episode. We'll figure that out. Merlin Olsen. I don't know if you know the name Merlin Olsen at all.
No.
Former NFL player, suggested by Michael Russo, my colleague at The Athletic. And funny enough, someone said, you look like Michael Russo, which is weird. I don't think you do at all.
I saw Michael said something like that's bad for CJ or something like that. So.
Yeah, that's it. The best one, though. I mean, I know we had PJ Stock there, but the best answer by far, Smart Insider Man. Do you remember that?
Oh, I remember that.
Smart Insider Man. You are the actual Smart Insider Man. The silhouette, the photo and all that. People wondered for years the identity of Smart Insider Man. It is you, sir. You are Smart Insider Man.
Do you know what I want to see in the comments? What do people, wrong answers only, what do I look like today?
Oh, we could do that. We can do that. Let's get a screen grab. Actually, you know what? I'm going to take a photo of this right now of what. Yeah, I'm just going to do it. Wrong answers. Who does CJ look like right now? I already know at least one person got an inside look at that. And you look like some lowlife from who lives in Florida, essentially. That's what they were saying.
That's the vibe I'm going for. So it's not totally off base to suggest it.
Yeah. Shout out Sid Sixero, who does his thing at Breakfast Television.
Fan of the show.
Big fan of the podcast. Friend of the show for life. All right. I think with that, all we really need to do is stick taps now. So who do you give your stick tap to for this week?
I'm going to give it to Pierre LeBrun, Darren Dreger, and Bob McKenzie, my teammates at TSN. A little bit of a sentimental one, but they've just been awesome to work with this year. And you know, I will say the one part about Free Agent Frenzy is it feels a bit like the last day of school when you're there. Mm-hmm. Like literally, the show ends and the cameras go down, and then we all just like, well, have a great summer. And maybe in the case of one or two of them, I might see them, but the truth is, maybe not too. And so it was a great end of the year. It was a great first season for me with TSN, and I even bought Pierre and Darren a bottle of wine to thank them for. Although Darren wasn't in studio, unfortunately, he didn't test positive for COVID, but he had some symptoms, and out of just being cautious, he stayed home. So his bottle of wine's still sitting with me, but maybe it'll survive the summer, and I'll give it to him in September, or maybe I won't quite make it to him.
No.
TBD, Darren.
No, you bought it for Darren. Give it to Darren. Don't be like, oh, it might not get to him.
You still set it aside for him, but who knows what the summer might bring? There might be a day where it just is too tempting.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Well, I hope it's good enough wine. My stick tap goes to Jaromir Jagr on a day of free agency where so many people trying to figure out where they're going to end up. Jaromir Jagr still out here shooting his shot. Put out a tweet. NHL GMs, I am also free agent once again. 6'3", 265, 50 years old, slow but strong in good hands, can bring experience and like to play only home games. Call me anytime. Also, as the owner of Hockey Club in Czech Liga, I am looking to sign a defenseman. No jokes. Shout out Jaromir Jagr for putting himself out there, man. Not an easy thing to do.
I've been a Jagr sort of fan for a while, so I very much appreciate that. I slapped a retweet on that in about 22 seconds yesterday.
Oh my God. Also in the comments, Hal Gill, he knows a thing or two about being a defenseman, just saying I'm available. Hey, maybe he's down for the adventure in the Czech Liga. But I love that tweet from Jaromir Jagr. He deserves a stick tap for this week. Thank you for adding a moment of hilarity amidst a wild first day of free agency.
Yes, sir. Do you know what's crazy, bud?
What?
We're gonna talk on Monday again.
Yeah.
And then we might go quiet for a little while.
Oh.
It's kind of like the last school vibes hanging around here too for you, me, and producer Nick.
Yeah. What are we gonna do of this summer? What are we gonna do? Like,
I don't know. We got to keep the group chat active to some degree.
yeah, I hope so. Like, I like chiming into the war room, as I think Adam called it, the war room. I like that name. I think we should go with it.
Yeah, I liked it. Yesterday, Adam, Steve, and Jesse were all involved in the CJ Show group chat. So it's a fun place to be.
Yeah. Also, something to think about. Today is episode 88 of the Chris Johnston Show. When it comes time for season 2, we're gonna have to start thinking of what to do for episode 100.
Oh wow! Well, we got some time to think on that.
We do have time to think on
Maybe
that.
maybe we'll give away Darren's bottle of wine to a lucky listener.
No, give Darren his wine.
I'm just kidding.
You're not kidding. You just said you think about drinking it for yourself. Give it to Darren.
This is our Eric Lindros episode. We're gonna roll out our Alex McGillney on Monday. I like that.
Man. I like that too. I like attributing the number. I mean, we're only going to get to a point. We only have so many other episodes where we can only attribute episode numbers to players. So yeah, I like that. Alexander McGillney. Also, he should be in the Hall of Fame. It's ridiculous that he's not there yet. But that's a whole other episode.
Ryan O'Reilly. 91 is going to be tough, man. There's a lot of great 91s, past and present in the NHL. Anyway, we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Exactly. With that, that's going to do it for CJ Show on this lovely Thursday. Siege, clearly you are already in summer vacation mode. Go out wherever you need to go. I'm glad you're able to at least stick through to the end of the recording this time, as opposed to what happened last week, Thursday.
It happens, bud. It happens. I can't believe that was a week ago. But yeah, stay hydrated, kids, and put on sunscreen.
Yes, sir. And get your questions in now for Ask CJ. We'll get to those on Monday. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And for CJ, I'm Julian. So long. Peace.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada's sportsbook.
Inside the game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie @JK McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.